Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Pat's Creative Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest joining me, none other than Badman Reviews, also known as Joe. Joe, would you care to introduce yourself to the people out there?
Hello, I'm Badman Reviews. For those who don't know me, I run a YouTube channel that focuses on fan-made games, cut content. I review stuff, top tens, all that fun stuff that a lot of video game reviewers are doing these days.
Yeah, and but not only are you doing it right now, but you've been doing it for quite a long time, right? How long ago did you start making these reviews?
I believe it's been a while since I've checked, but I believe I've been doing Badman Reviews for about 8, 9 years now.
And that, but that
So
wasn't the where you first started with YouTube, right? You also did stuff
no,
before then.
I've been doing stuff way before then. It's not on the channel. Well, a lot of it isn't on the channel anymore, but I've been doing YouTube since pretty much YouTube started.
Gotcha. Yeah, I only personally discovered you. I had seen your name flowing around a lot back in maybe 2014 or 2015, and I was at that time I was a little bit more active in the game reviewing community than I am now, or at least staying on top of where everybody is, what they're uploading. I kind of I had my life took a little bit of a busy turn, and I kind of left the scene for a little bit, and I'm kind of now returning to it. And I was very
Yeah.
happy to see that you were still uploading because I very much enjoyed the way you presented the games, and even just your general approach to how you would showcase like fan made games and stuff like that. And you seem to always have a almost an appreciation for the developers themselves, even going as far as linking them in descriptions and stuff. And
Oh, for sure.
I'm just curious, and this might be a good question to start with. When you are reviewing these games, do you feel like do you do so with a certain kind of purpose? Like, is it mostly out of appreciating games, or just expressing your emotion towards them, or trying to help the consumer with what they get? Like, what do you think's the biggest purpose in your reviews?
Um, I guess it depends on what I'm reviewing. When it comes to commercial stuff, like brand new games coming out, I try to give like my best input on how I feel on a game. A lot of it just comes down to trying to be somewhat entertaining for the audience. I'm never like the guy who's very critical on something. I make that
Sure.
clear when people come into my channel. Like, it's hard for me personally to be critical on a game when I review it because I'm the guy who just kind of likes everything, and it's hard for me to not like something.
Sure.
Like a lot of the games that come out, and people are like, "Oh, that was garbage. It's the worst thing ever." I'm just like, you know what? I had fun with it. Like, I liked it. Like, I don't see what was wrong with it. I have a hard time like picking out the bad stuff in games, so I try to focus more
Sure.
on like the positives and like try to also be entertaining while I'm doing it at the same time.
So, do you think, like when you're picking a game to review, do you usually pick it based on like, hey, this had a little bit of an impact on me when I was playing, and I feel like I want to talk about it, or do you think reviewing games is more just a vehicle for you to be able to perform, essentially? Because you keep going back to that entertainment point. Would you say games are mostly just for the sake of entertaining people, or?
Yeah, it really depends. Sometimes I'm feeling more algorithm-y, where I'll
Sure.
try to pick a newer game, but for most part, it depends where you're looking at. Like way back when I was doing older reviews, probably years ago, it was a lot of like I was doing creative intros. So I was trying to be entertaining with like my intros, and then I would review the game after being like making a creative intro for the video. So I would try to look through my game catalog, and I was like, what could make something really funny, like some funny intro for this game? So I'd have to look through games and be like, okay, well, I just bought this game for the Steam Summer Sale, so I can make something funny about the Steam Summer Sale. Or
Right.
this game is like a rhythm game, so I could do some kind of like dancing intro or something like that.
Sure.
Or another one I had was like a war one where I like started off with me and my friends, and we were like pretending that we were like in a war or something. Um, so that's kind of the creative end of that. More recently, it's a lot more. I've just been like picking games I really enjoy, and
Sure.
trying to like show off like games I like. Like recently, I went over all the Crash Bandicoot. I went through over a bunch of Crash Bandicoot games and Ratchet and Clank games. A lot of games that I played when I was a kid and I loved, and I just kind of want to like show off and talk about.
Right. So right now you think it's currently more response driven of your response to games, while
Yeah.
before you were trying to find games to fit a fun, entertaining, creative style, basically.
Yeah, it changes depending on how I'm feeling, you know?
Sure. Well, then I guess another question I want to ask is, do you feel that you are more of a performer or more of a game reviewer? Because, like, would you say your craft is mostly about educating the audience in a sense, or do you think it's more just trying to entertain them?
I think it's a nice mix of both, especially because obviously I'm not just doing reviews all the time. So a lot of times I do cut content, which is very informative. There's not a lot of entertainment in those videos. I try to be as entertaining as I can and keep the audience intrigued, but a lot of it comes from the content itself. A lot of people are coming to see, oh, what was deleted from this game? And I love
Right.
like being able to look through games and pick them out and be like, oh, like I didn't know that didn't make it into the game, and it's a game that I love. So if I'm interested in this, someone else has got to be interested in this, and I should share it with them. And then when it like the review, like the just straight up reviews, I try to be more entertainment based. And then the fan
Sure.
games is usually like a mix of the both. It's like a mix of trying to be entertaining, but then also like trying to show people like, hey, look, here's some cool fan games that you can try if
Right.
you're, bored of, what's released by the publishers.
Right. And then you do streaming as well. Do you think that's kind of more of an outlet for performance or entertainment, or do you think that's more just I'm experiencing this game and I want you guys to experience it with me?
Definitely performance. I try to be as entertaining as possible when I'm streaming. When it comes to doing character voices and being energetic, I'm trying to be entertaining for the people watching. It's never come on and follow along as I play this game for the
Sure.
first time. A lot of the time, it's just like, hey, let's have a good fun time.
Right. I mean, you recently even did a Goofy cover, right?
Yeah, that was weird.
That was done on stream though, correct?
No, that was a
Oh no.
that was recorded in a studio I work at. It took me about a whole day to like actually get it to a point I was happy with it because I never considered myself any sort of singer, but the response to it was actually a much more positive than I thought it was going to be.
Well, that's good. You got
Yeah.
some Goofy fans out there. So because you're fascinated in entertainment, do you think if you weren't reviewing games and you weren't playing games, do you think you would find another way to vehicle that, or do you think you would just leave that industry completely?
Oh no, definitely. Since I've been in high school, so like outside of YouTube, I went to college for entertainment technology.
No kidding.
So I do all of like the lighting and sound design and stuff like that for concerts and plays and stuff here where I live. I have a bunch of like side jobs that revolve around, recording bands and working with, high name bands like Alice Cooper, Bruno Mars. Like they've come in and I've set up shows for them here at our local casino.
Right.
So even like without YouTube, I work behind the scenes with entertainers all the time, and I've done acting in the past as well. So always been into the entertainment kind of stuff.
Gotcha. And do you find yourself more drawn to the formal aspects of like setting up lights and getting that good sounding audio or whatnot, or do you think you enjoy the performer side of it more, being in front of the camera as opposed to behind?
I definitely enjoy the performance side of it more. But I mean, obviously, it's hard to get into the performing side of things
Sure.
and get noticed.
Yeah. Well, because so can you kind of explain just how you ended up on YouTube basically? Because if you were going to school there or whatnot, did that start while you were still in school or?
Oh yeah, it was back in like the end of grade school, so probably around grade 8, I uploaded my first YouTube video, and YouTube had just like started.
Sure.
And there wasn't much on there. I didn't even know how to like put stuff on there at the time. I think like to give it like an idea of when I started uploading, like Guitar Hero 3 had just come out. So the first video I uploaded onto the channel that I can remember, it might have been the second video, but either way, it was just me playing Guitar Hero 3 for the
Gotcha.
Wii, and it was like I had a camcorder pointed at the TV, and you could see
course.
like the tube line, like the CRT lines
Yes.
coming up the TV, and you could hear the
Everybody's
guitar
start,
like clicking in the
Everybody's
background.
first video.
Yeah, so it was like way back when Guitar Hero 3 came out. I can't even remember how long ago that was, but like that's like the first video I uploaded, and it just came down to like, hey, like I see some other people uploading random stuff to YouTube. Why not upload some video game stuff on there?
Sure.
And like, I wasn't uploading a lot of stuff. Like, it was just like that one Guitar Hero video, and that's kind of like
Right.
what opened the channel. And then I didn't upload anything for probably a year or two, and then I started doing other stuff.
Gotcha. And were you drawing any inspirations from specific creators at the time? Like, are
When
there any that, like, old creators that you could, I mean, not old creators, but creators from way back then that you can kind of give names to as to like how they inspired you and whatnot?
Yeah, I would. So when I first started uploading, I wouldn't really say there was anyone who inspired me to like upload like the Guitar Hero stuff and random stuff. That was more so of a
Sure.
just like, let's just upload what I'm doing. Because me and my friend we would like make weird home videos, and I was like, well, like those aren't shared anywhere. Those are just our own personal things. But
Right.
like, I decided like, oh, maybe I can just do some of my own stuff and upload it onto this website called YouTube. So I started doing that, and eventually I started watching a few years after I would started watching like reviewers. There weren't a lot of them back then, but the big ones that got me interested were Angry Video Game Nerd, Nostalgia Critic, and Spoonie. Those were like the three like big guys back then.
Sure.
And then Let's Playing became like a big thing for a while, and that's when I really started uploading a lot more onto the channel, when I was like, oh, like people are doing Let's Plays, like that's kind of like the Guitar Hero thing I uploaded.
Right.
Maybe I can try to get into that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how there was that just big boom of people suddenly making Let's Plays, and it wasn't always around like it is now. Like
Yeah.
there was no prominence to it before, and now it's just a genre. It's a type of entertainment that works for a handful of people, right?
Yeah.
So and when you were making your reviews, you said that you were also trying to find ways to make that entertaining and finding creative kind of skits, if you will, to associate with that. Do you think that's because you came from Let's Plays that are all derived from trying to entertain the audience, or?
No, actually, like the skit ideas came a lot from me just wanting to it was I was just starting with the reviewing stuff, and I was trying to like find my personality and find like where I
Sure.
fit into reviewing. So I was jumping around from a lot of stuff. When I first started, it was like kind of like skit based.
Right.
And then I jumped to like more like analytical stuff where I was like actually like rating like different segments of the game. And then I like switched back to the more like funny skit stuff, and a lot of it actually like came from the comments of the channel, which is weird to think about these days because like I don't take a lot of what like the comments like to heart anymore like I used to. But when I
Sure.
first started, it was like I was making funny reviews. Like I made a funny review of Twinsanity, and one of like the top comments for that video was just like, this isn't a review at all. This is just you being dumb for like 5 minutes. And I was just like, well, I guess he's kind of right. Like, I didn't really review the game. I was just kind of being funny. So, like,
Sure.
after that, I switched to like a more analytical style where I actually like reviewed games. But then that kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm not really like, I don't know how to be analytical. I don't like being analytical, and this isn't fun.
Sure.
So, I kind of like stopped making videos because I didn't know like what to do. And eventually I was like, well, you know what? I'll just go back to being funny. I'll make skits and I'll pretend to be funny with my friends. So I got some friends together, and some of them held the camera, some of them were in the shots, and we just like
Sure.
had fun with it. And I started making skits and whatnot and stuff like that.
Yeah, and with regards to comments, do you think that you are, because obviously you don't want to hold weight to every single comment that you get, right? And that's the
Yeah.
same in any art field. I'm just curious if you think that the type of comments that people got back when you first started have kind of changed over time, and that's kind of what makes you hold less value to maybe specific critiques, or do you think it's more a case of you just growing and now you don't need those nitpicking critiques as much because you've kind of found your style?
Yeah, it's definitely like I've more grown into it for
Sure.
sure. Because back then it was like every comment I got was just like, I need to like pay attention to what everyone's saying, and I need to like
Right.
do what everyone's saying. And now it's kind of just like, you know what, this is my show. I'll do it how I like. But like if someone says something that's obviously noticeable, like, hey, like the audio was kind of off in this segment, or like maybe like the lighting looked weird in this segment, like stuff like that, like I will pay attention to and be like, you know what, maybe I can do that better. But when it comes to like actual like aesthetics of the show, or like
Mm-hmm.
the flow and style of the show, that's like, it's kind of my choice and how I want it to
Yeah.
run.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Um, it's interesting when people comment specifically on like theme and tonality, or just personality rather, in the works, as opposed to things like maybe critiquing like, hey, that you didn't I don't know, because like there's two different things you can critique. You kind of critique the conception of it, and you can critique the formal elements of it. And in conception, you know, some people might critique how you go about reviewing a game, or maybe you like, hey, you forgot to include like certain aspects that are actually pretty important, or you didn't fully explain yourself in this area. But then there's also just like, it seems weird that you're trying to be funny while also being analytical, and like those are the kind of things that you can't really hold value to, because if it's something, if it's your personality that is driving the content, you can't just change your personality because the comment tells you to, right?
Yeah, and the other thing like I've noticed is that a lot of the times you can tell that commenters don't really pay attention, or
Sure.
haven't like paid attention to the full video. For example, recently I made a Crash Bandicoot fan games video. Oh no, it was a Sonic fan games video, and I talked about it like a bunch of games, and I didn't include one game that I know is very important to the community, and a lot of them talked about. The reason I didn't include it is because I had already talked about it in a previous video. So at the end of the video, I talk about like, hey, like if you want to see other fan games like
Sure.
this one, go check out this video because I talked about these games in that video. Like 20, 30, 40 comments all stating like, where's this game? And I'm like,
Right.
and then I link it and I like pin it as a top comment. Like, if you're looking for this game, check this video. Still
Sure.
getting comments about
Yeah.
it. And you're like, there's just like certain things you need to ignore.
Yeah. Well, and I think the majority of commenters usually comment before the video is over, because
Yeah.
once the video is over, they click off to the next page, or sometimes YouTube clicks off for them. You know, it does the autoplay feature and gets you off there. So, yeah, like information that's like even just halfway through sometimes gets missed because most of the comments just come in from like around the beginning or so.
Yeah.
But in general, do you think there's been a shift of commenters' expectations in what you create? Because you've kind of been able to get comments from several years, right? Have you noticed any kind of change in that, or do you think it's all pretty much the same?
I think it's all pretty much the same.
Gotcha.
I haven't noticed too much of a difference. And like, there's usually like a nice split between people who are like, oh, great, like another video, I was looking forward to this, or like, this is awesome. And then you have your
Sure.
segments that are like, oh, you missed this thing. Like, people who kind of like point out like things that you missed. And then you have
Right.
your other like small, very small portion of people who are like, hey, you're a bad word. I'm not going to say it, but there's the mean people.
Right. Right. You're a bad man, bad man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the even smaller portion who likes to comment about how I don't have hair anymore.
Is that then a common trend in recent videos, or?
Oh yeah, definitely. It likes to be brought up very frequently,
Gotcha.
which I'm fine with. It's kind of like a funny thing in the community now. There's like the quip of Badman Reviews now, so I enjoy it. It's kind of funny.
Sure, sure. I mean, like, you know, of all things to get comments about, that can't be the worst, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, what if comments haven't changed as much? Do you think expectations in other creators have changed at all? Like, because I understand that there was almost a renaissance period with regards to collaborations on YouTube. To when collaborations were like a much bigger part, and then there was kind of a shift in maybe algorithm or just people's interests, and it seems like collaborations have taken kind of a more backseat towards what they used to be, at least specifically in the game reviewing industry. Have you noticed any general trend shifts in with regards to like what other creators feel or what they want, or why maybe there's not as much collaboration anymore between them, or do you have any thoughts on that specifically?
Yeah, well, the biggest issue with collaborations is they don't work anymore. If you collaborate, if I made, I know multiple people who have made and have done videos for someone huge, like Did You Know Gaming. They'll be on Did You Know Gaming. At the end of it, there'll be a link to their channel on Did You Know Gaming, and it'll be like, you know, blank feature, Did You Know Gaming video title featuring blank. And they'll see like a jump of maybe 1,000 viewers and a couple hundred subscribers on their channel.
Sure.
It's not even so for a channel that big. Let's say someone like me were to get on Did You Know Gaming, I would probably only see at max like an additional 1,000 subscribers, which
Right.
like it's nice, but it's not worth it sometimes. So when you're working with other creators of your size, like say if well back when Ant Dude was my size and we did a collaboration together, there was no noticeable difference in our
Sure.
views or our subscribers. We didn't gain a huge amount together. We didn't Our videos still pulled in about the same amount of views. So a lot of the times collaborations nowadays just focused on like, hey, I like you and I'd like to
Sure.
make a video with you. So let's do that for fun.
Yeah.
There's no real like personal gain to it anymore.
Right.
There's no reason for someone to go out and search for collaborations because they don't give a substantial gain.
Right.
For me, I feel like back in the day when collaborations were happening a lot, it also wasn't even for like personal gain. A lot of the times when I was doing it, it was back in the hidden block days, and we had a huge group of reviewers that at least I found, and we got together and we just kind of like talked and threw information back and forth. And a lot of times it'd be like, hey, I'm making a video and I need someone for this weird sketch. Do you want to
Sure.
pop in for 10 seconds and like make something funny with me? And a lot of the times they'll just be like, yeah, sure, why not? Like, let's have some fun with it. Recently I did a collaboration with, one of my friends here in Windsor, and he's got a channel of himself, and we're like, I didn't even know there was other YouTubers in my town. Like,
Right.
let's get together and do something. So we got together and we made a Ratchet and Clank video together, which was amazing.
Sure. Well, and do you think because there isn't as much I don't want to say personal gain, but kind of branding gain or networking gain. Do you think
Yeah.
that almost makes the collaborations that do happen almost better or maybe more pure or something? Or do you think it doesn't really matter?
I don't think it really matters. I feel like a lot of the times, like, at least for the people I know, when they're
Sure.
collaborating to have fun for the most part.
Right.
I've never really seen like a huge amount of people who have collaborated for the sake of, trying to gain more views. Or I know there's
Right.
people out there who do that, but like for the most part, all the friends I know who have collaborated with other YouTubers, it's all just been because like either like, hey, like I watched your videos, you're like a huge inspiration to me. Now we're friends. Like, you mind if we like
Sure.
make something together? Like, or like people who are just already friends who just want to do stuff together. It's always
Right.
just like it's a nice connection between friends I find, and that's like usually where the collaborations come from. So they're always made with like passion and love, and that's why they're always entertaining
Right.
and funny.
For sure. Well, to kind of switch gears a little bit, and get back to another question I wanted to ask, do you have like other art forms? Do you create with any other medium, or is videography? I mean, obviously you mentioned that you also work with a lot of equipment for other entertainers, but do you find yourself like wanting to perform your own music or anything similar?
I would say not really. I wouldn't say I'm an artist in any aspect. I can't draw. I can't play any instruments. I can't sing. I would like to sing. I've taken lessons, but I've never actually become good at it.
Sure.
That's like the only other aspiration I would say I possibly have, but I've never really followed. For the most part, it's just all videography and, creating video content. There's nothing else that I find myself really inspiring to do or find
Sure.
myself have like, natural skills at.
Right. And what about like in games? Do you find yourself going towards creative outlets in games or?
Um, no, what exactly do you mean by that
Well, I
question?
mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out like when you're making videos, if that's kind of a way of scratching your creative itch, or if it's more so just for the purpose of entertaining. Because like, I have a creative itch, right? And then find myself playing a lot of games that have creative outlets, so that I can kind of ease myself over until the next creative project that I work on, such as maybe something like Minecraft or Animal Crossing, where you're very much in control of what you create. Do you think your video making comes from this urge to create, or do you think it's almost irrelevant?
I don't know really. I feel like I make videos because I like making them. I don't know if it's really like a lot of the times it's just I want to do something. I don't
Sure.
want to be sitting around doing nothing. And YouTube kind of gets that for me. Like I like making videos. It's fun, it's entertaining, and I like entertaining other people, so I go to YouTube. When it comes to my personal gaming, no, not creative
Gotcha.
at all. It's very a lot of the times it's competitive shooters. A lot of my time goes into Destiny. A few days ago, I actually streamed it. Me and my team did a day one raid race in Destiny.
Sure.
So we completed the raid the day it came out. So it's a lot of stuff like that. Back when a little bit before I started YouTube, I was really into like the Major League Gaming competitive scene back in high school. So I've always been into like competitive games.
Sure.
So YouTube is kind of like just like its own in a bubble, kind of like this is
Right.
what I do for like to create entertainment.
Sure. Well, at the very least, I do think a connection can be drawn to trying to competitively improve your craft, similar to
Yeah,
how you kind of try to improve your video craft, right? Because ultimately, every art medium does have a craft, and if there's a craft, it must be some form of art, right? So similar to like cooking is an art form that you have to manually learn and get the reflexes for. I think some could argue that competitive play is an art medium, right? Obviously, there could be discussions on it though, and
oh
and
yeah.
I'm not a art historian or art theorist or anything. But
No, but I get what you mean.
yeah, I basically there's something to be said about trying to better a skill, because I think at the end of the day that can be similar to art in general. But anyway, just to kind of transition also, or go back to what you were mentioning earlier with video making, if you don't feel that you're kind of making videos for the sake of making art, essentially, do you find that there's any aspects of video making that stand out to you over others? Like, do you find that you particularly enjoy scripting more, or maybe editing more, or performing more? What usually sticks with you the most in the video making process?
I feel like every YouTuber has the thing that they hate doing the most.
Sure.
Every single person I've asked has always been like, this part right here, it's
Yeah.
the worst. I hate doing it every time.
Right.
For me, it's the editing. I've never been a
Yeah.
huge fan of editing. It's always been hard for me. It's nice like when you get near the end of it and you're like, it's almost done. Like you can see the final project coming
Yeah.
together. But that's the thing that always, every time I get to that part of the creative process, it's just like, oh, I'll do it in a day or two.
Sure.
But for the parts I enjoy, a lot of it is I like theory, like coming up with ideas. I like coming up with like the
Right.
next video,
Conceptualizing.
and then the performing aspect of it, actually getting on camera and figuring out the best way to like make something the best it can be with
Right.
my voice.
So do you almost feel that the conceptualizing and the scripting and the performing, that's more your actual craft, while the formal elements such as video editing is just a way of getting it out there, essentially?
Yeah, I can't say like I don't enjoy the video editing part. It's definitely
Sure.
like I'm into it. Like when I'm doing it, it's just like, okay, I'm coming up with ideas
Right.
and making things happen, but
It's maybe a little
it's
more
definitely
daunting.
yeah, it's more daunting. It's same with the scripting too. Like the scripting's kind of the same as the editing, where like yeah, I'm coming up with ideas for the video, but having to actually like write it down is always a
Sure.
pain for me.
Well, with that said, then, do you find, because you do also deal with a lot free form live stuff with streaming and your experience with Let's Plays, do you find it's almost easier to get your ideas out outside of the script than it is on the script?
Definitely. I find like when I'm coming up with ideas in my head, I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. That'll be funny.
Sure.
But then when I try to put it down on a script, I'm just like, you know what? This might not be as good as I think it is. It's always
Sure.
in the scripting process that I start to doubt myself. And I've attempted like doing just straight up non-scripted stuff before, but I find it's always comes off as a bit like amateurish, like not like you can tell it's not planned.
Sure.
At the same time, it's usually like funnier and like entertaining, but at the same time, you can tell that it's not like well put together.
Right.
So that's why I try to like stick to the scripting format, because you can, make things more prominent and make sure you're getting all the information across.
Definitely.
And you're not missing anything.
Right. Right. And do you think having that video aid also with regards to editing and putting up imagery to convey your points, do you think that ultimately helps get your point across, or do you think it's more of a way to just facilitate something entertaining?
It's definitely a mix of both. It's a way to be entertaining, but definitely having that video aspect, it can help in so many ways to like make a point prominent. Like, this is important, so I'm going to exclamation mark it with something important at this point.
Right. So, so you would say basically conceptualizing, that's kind of like where almost kind of where your art form is, right? Is conceptualizing, and that's almost your baby, while everything else is just kind of a way to get it out there, right?
Oh yeah.
Gotcha. It's interesting because I ask this question frequently, and I always get different responses, because for some people, it's the actual performance part where they feel like this is where my art is. This is actually saying the information given. While I've also known people who edit full time, and they think they see editing as, since it's the final step, it's almost the confirmation that this is art being worked on.
That's exactly what I mean. Like, every YouTuber I ask has given me almost a different answer, or something, you know, a little bit different from everyone.
Sure.
Which is interesting, because you can tell everyone like has their own feel about how they're making videos, and everyone's different.
Yeah.
Like, for me, if YouTube picked up and I could afford it, I would probably pay someone to edit my videos for me.
Sure. Yeah. I guess to ask a little bit more about editing, do you think part of the reason it's more daunting, or you put it off, is because, like, would you consider yourself a perfectionist when it comes to post-production
No.
or just producing videos in general? No?
Compared to a lot of the other YouTubers I know, it's not. Like, I know people who will just like constantly pick and prod at like specific parts of the video, especially during the editing process. For me, it's just like, all right, let's get it put together, and you know what, that's good. Let's get it out there.
Right. Okay.
Especially when I was a while back, I was putting out 2 videos a week, which was killer, and I just couldn't afford to be perfectionist at that point, especially for like my big main videos. When I was doing like a Fanmade Games or a review like every week, I couldn't afford to be a perfectionist, because it needed to get out every Thursday, or you know, the algorithm would kick my butt right off there.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely something positive about that, though, you know, having a deadline to make sure that you're not a perfectionist and waiting too long, because that's where from my experience with talking to people, that's where most of the burnout comes from, is just constantly trying to work on one project and never quite getting it up to that 100% that you view in your mind. But setting those kind of deadlines can kind of help, like, okay, so now 100% is whatever I can get done before the video comes out. And I think that ultimately can help with just creative longevity and making sure you don't get burnout on projects.
Yeah.
But you know, every creator operates differently. There's definitely some people out there who can spend months on one video, and then who knows how many burnouts they have in the process, but ultimately when it comes out, it's they're happy with the product, then they can work on the next one. I just found pretty early on that that's not the style I can go with, because I find that if I stick too long on a project, then I'm stopping myself from saying other things that I want to talk about. And podcasting ended up being, this is how I can express myself the most efficiently, basically. So, you know, every creator just works differently. So to kind of transition over to something we briefly mentioned earlier, you do a lot of videos talking about fan-made games, or sometimes indie games and whatnot. Do you think that's mostly out of purpose for raising appreciation for developers, or do you think it's more just showcasing games that originally weren't maybe seen in the public eye? Or why do you think you're so drawn to fan-made games and indie games, essentially?
Well, the original thing that drew me towards it was Newgrounds, actually. The original idea came from me talking about old Newgrounds games I used to play as a kid, and a lot of those were technically fan games. A lot of them were like Zelda Flash games or Pokemon Flash games. So when I was talking about them, I'm like, you know, these are cool. Like I want to play more Zelda, but there's no new Zeldas. So what do I do?
Right.
Well, there's these amazing developers out there who are making their own Zeldas. So you can go find them. And like when I first started, it was more just of a, you know, let's show off, like, if you want to play more of this game. Here's more fan games that you can try.
Right.
Just kind of trying to point people towards the direction where they can find more of what they love. But then as I continued making those videos, and developers actually started reaching out to me, and I started talking to the developers of these fan games, I actually like started getting more involved with them, and like actually
Sure.
seeing like what goes into it and how it like works, and it was really interesting. And so it became more of a passion towards showing off like the hard work that these fans are doing.
Right.
The biggest one came from when I was doing Spyro fan games. I actually worked really heavily with the Spyro community and all of their fan game creators. I went into their Discord. I talked with like all of the fan game creators on the Spyro Discord. They sent me assets, and they talked me through like their creative process, and I tried to make that a big part of that video.
Right.
And it really showed off. A lot of the times though, it's a bit more disappointing. You talk about a game that hasn't had an update in 5 years, and there's no way to
Sure.
get hold of the developers. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like it sucks that this isn't being worked on anymore, but it is cool, so still check it out.
Right. Well, and I from some of the videos I saw, it seemed like you weren't necessarily afraid to show projects that might be less than perfect from the fan made stuff. But what I like about your approach is that you always find something to appreciate about it, and you seem to draw
Yeah.
attention to that.
That's the thing. It's like making games isn't easy.
Yeah.
Like
No kidding.
Like I know plenty of YouTubers who, when they do like fan made games, they'll pick out a game and they'll like bash the hell out of it just to be funny. And for me,
Sure.
I can't do that. I can't pick a game and just be like, this is garbage. This is like, and make some
Right.
kind of joke out of it, because I know that there's a developer behind that game who, for all I know, is 14. It's his first
Yeah.
game he ever made, and it's way better than anything I could ever do.
Yeah.
So it's like I try to lean more towards that, like like obviously like, oh okay, well this game isn't good, but like like this part of it is actually pretty cool and entertaining.
Sure.
It's like you should still give it a try if you want.
Yeah. It also it's an optimistic approach to still encourage fan made games too, because the last thing you want to do is discourage small developers like that from experimenting further and making things better.
Exactly.
So I like how your approach shows aspects that can definitely be improved on, but it's all with an optimistic stance, basically.
Yeah.
And you know, you also often give like the benefit of the doubt too. Like I remember specifically with your Donkey Kong fan made games, you brought up the one that was the 3D Donkey Kong side scroller, and something you said was like, this, while this isn't super fun right now, if you imagine a world where Donkey Kong Country Returns didn't exist, this is something that you'd be much more interested in, right? And I just love when creators take that alternative to show things that you might not normally initially think about, because we live in the time we live in. But I basically appreciate the optimistic approach that you take to it, essentially.
Thanks. It's definitely, as someone who's always tries to be optimistic about everything I play, and it's hard for me to actually criticize stuff. It's the route I've found best for me to go down, is always trying
Sure.
to be optimistic about what I'm reviewing.
Yeah. Well, because it can be easy to get lost in mechanics, but ultimately the reason we play games is because of the emotional response we have to them, and breaking it down to that core of like, this is what I emotionally responded to. I think that's what we need more of in the industry, because it's very consumer driven right now. It's so many reviews are for the sake of protecting the consumer or whatnot, which is fine. You need stuff like that, but ultimately, I think sometimes we get caught up in what a good mechanic is or a bad mechanic, and then we ultimately forget that feeling we actually get when we play.
Oh, definitely.
But so with regards to you being a little bit more involved in talking to fan-made developers and whatnot, do you find that you do you have any interest in game design at some point? Like, would you be interested in working on your own game, or do you think it's more just for educational purposes?
More just for educational purposes. I mean, recently I have been teaching myself some game design, but it's mostly just due to the fact that I've been trying to get into game development through sound design. So I've been trying to teach myself how to implement sound effects and stuff into video games, because I want to make sound effects for video games. So recently I actually took like a course in Unreal and made like a shitty like starter course where you walk from point A to point B and pick up a
Sure.
couple orbs and open a door to end the level. So I have like dabbled in it a little bit, but it's
Hmm.
mostly like a means to an end to like kind of teach myself the basic aspects of engines and whatnot.
Sure. So even though you're very interested in how games function and how they feel, you exploring game design is more for the sake of sound design specifically, something
Yeah.
that's not necessarily, I guess, functionally driven, but more aesthetically driven, basically.
Yeah.
So, how long have you been interested in sound design then?
Sound design specifically, it's been a couple years. It actually derived, well, I've always wanted to get into video game design since I was a kid.
Sure.
Um, but when I was a kid and I was in high school, I very quickly realized that I don't want to do that. I like I took
Yeah.
programming classes and I'm like, this is not for me. I'm not enjoying
Sometimes
this.
it takes seeing one line of code to make you realize, oh, I don't want to make video games, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened
Yeah.
with me. But I still wanted to like get into the video game industry somehow.
Hmm.
So I couldn't figure out a way to do it. I was trying to get into like community management and stuff like that, and I couldn't break into that either. So recently, a couple of years ago, I was at I think it was Magfest, and
Hmm.
the people behind the sound design for Elder Scrolls Online were there, and they had a conference. So I was like, oh, this seems interesting. Sound design for video games. I'll sit in. So I went there and I
Sure.
sat in on it and I listened to the whole, um, the whole thing that they did. And I went and talked to like some of the guys afterwards and asked them like, oh, like, how does this work? Like, how did you get into it? And since then, I've been pretty interested in it. I've been like trying to learn all the programs that you need to learn to get into it. And I've been learning how to like make sound effects from, smashing vegetables and stuff like that.
Sure.
So that's kind of what basically got me interested in it.
And did your previous experience with going to school and working with equipment help in that regards, or do you think it's an entirely different ballpark?
No, it definitely helped. It's definitely like
Okay.
a whole different ballpark, but it's just like it's like if, I don't know how to explain it in the easiest terms, but basically like all of my knowledge with the equipment that gets used in sound design
Right.
helped me. So like I know like how to set up, what mics to use and how to like set up the
Right.
mics properly. But in the terms of like actually making the sounds and making things sound cool, it's like completely different than like making a band sound nice compared to like making a gunshot sound nice is like two
Sure.
completely different things, especially when you start thinking about how do you implement that sound into a video game? How do you make it
Right.
sound far away when your enemy's far away? Or how to make it sound like he's close to you or moving around you? Or there's
Right.
so many different ways to implement sounds into games these days.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Have you been almost like building up a library of sounds over your journey of this, or is it more like something you have to fully see the context of what your sounds will be used before you
So
can even make them?
so I've more recently been trying to make. It's been more of a recent thing where I've been
Okay.
making like little. I'll take like a 10-second snippet of something.
Sure.
Like I took the Harry Potter scene where all the letters are flying into the room and Harry gets his first letter to Hogwarts, and I
Right.
stripped all the audio from it and I recreated all of the audio. For that segment from the ground up. And so I've been taking little 10-second clips and like trying to remake all the audio for that. And
Gotcha.
that's been a more recent thing, mostly just because before I was just so busy with work. I like my actual
Sure.
job. I had never had time to try anything like that.
Yeah.
Especially when, you're working a full-time job and then also trying to do YouTube and there's a million other things
For
going on
sure.
with life.
Yeah.
But now that with everything going on, now that I have some spare time, I've been trying to use that spare time the best I can
Yeah.
to make
Yeah, for sure.
a portfolio or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. And so because you have so much experience with specifically, I don't know what the proper term would be, and I don't want to embarrass myself, but the with sound equipment and video equipment, I don't know what kind of entertainment equipment, I guess, because you have
Yeah.
so much experience with that. What would you recommend to what kind of equipment would you recommend to someone who is just starting out on YouTube? Like, do you have any pro tips as to what they should look for in maybe microphones or cameras or lighting, or maybe like what the most important part is formally of what they're making? Like, do you have any advice in that area?
Um, I would say when you're first starting out, especially since a lot of people who are just starting out are so young and they don't have a lot of money,
Sure.
the most important thing right off the bat is audio. Yeah, you need to have your audio down. Like a viewer will leave your channel immediately if your audio is garbage.
Right.
If you got like a fuzzy video or your lighting's off like a bit, or you know your color correction isn't right, like
Right.
they'll deal with video issues. Audio, no, it's an immediate no-go. It's like it's a proven fact that if you have
Yeah.
bad audio, people will leave immediately.
Sure.
I'm gonna get it slapped by like a million people I know about this, because they all hate these mics. But for a beginner, a USB plug-in mic, a Yeti, something like that
Yeah.
is extremely easy to set up. You don't have to learn anything. You don't have to learn programs. You don't have to buy multiple pieces of equipment. It's literally
Sure.
you plug the USB in and it goes. I mean, can you get better equipment for the exact same price that's going to sound a lot better? Yes, but is it as easy to set up? No.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't even need a driver. You just plug it in and you're good.
Yeah, that's what I started with. It's what I still use most of the time.
Yeah.
Do I need to upgrade now? Yes, but yeah, USB microphones are extremely easy and friendly for newcomers who don't know
Sure.
anything about audio. If I were to personally actually recommend something, I would definitely recommend actually picking up, you know, an actual XLR microphone. You can find plenty
Yeah.
for $100 that are fantastic, and you know, get an actual device that to plug them into, and
Sure.
you know, which can all be done for the same price as something like a Yeti. But if someone's looking for something quick and easy, stuff like the Yeti is just so easy to recommend.
Yeah. Sure. And so, and what about like maybe more software side of things? Like, would there be any programs or something that you would suggest looking out for, or any kind of tips and trick to make their job easier? Or
If I'm going to go the totally legal route,
right?
like every YouTuber does,
Yes.
Sony Vegas is an amazing program for
Sure.
beginners. It's what I started out on. It's cheap. It goes on sale all the time on Humble Bundle or on Steam.
Right. And it's a one-time buy, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So Sony Vegas is an amazing starting program if you can get your hands on it.
Sure.
That's what I start. Well, technically I started with Windows Movie Maker, but we're not going to talk about that.
Right.
Sony Vegas is an amazing pickup for anyone who wants to start learning editing. For audio, Audacity, it's free.
Yeah.
It works fantastic. Has amazing noise suppression. It's surprisingly for something that's free. So those are some great pickups right off the bat. OBS is a fantastic program as well.
Sure.
All great stuff for beginners to use. I know you can find a couple of different Reddit forums for, like, if you look audio, like YouTubers or Twitch, like Twitch's Reddit and whatnot, they usually have a list of like, hey, if you want to get into Twitch or YouTube, making YouTube content, like here's a list of like free softwares you can use.
Yeah. And
so
it's worth mentioning, there's no shame in using only like free stuff, right? Like ultimately we're all just using the best we can get.
Yeah, like a lot of the free stuff is just as good as the new stuff. Like obviously the stuff you're paying for is going to have better features and it's going to be easier to use, and you're going to be able to get more plugins for it and stuff like that. But not always is the expensive choice the better one.
For sure. Yeah. Well, and this definitely didn't used to be the case back when YouTube first started, right? I mean, I wasn't necessarily there when YouTube first started, but I'm sure you can vouch for the fact that, you know, freeware has just absolutely exploded in comparison to back then.
Yeah.
You know, even when OBS was first released, it was hardly functional in terms of comparing it to maybe other screen recording softwares out there that costed actual money. And same thing with video editors. But now there seems to be free alternatives for pretty much everything at this point.
Yeah. Back when I started too, when I was streaming way back when I was streaming, OBS didn't exist. You didn't have, like, there was no choice for creating overlays or templates or you know, like putting your video, like putting your webcam over your stuff. There was like almost no options for that.
Right.
Like you had to, like, so it wasn't twitch.tv back then, it was justin.tv.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to like link justin.tv. I forget what it was called. It was like an Adobe program and then you would plug your Hauppauge into your computer, because there
Right.
was no Elgato back then either. Hauppauge was like the big thing back when during Modern Warfare 2 when everyone was getting into it.
Right.
And you'd have to like plug that in and you would just get the game signal. That you couldn't overlay your camera on it or anything like
Yeah.
that. And it would send that straight to Justin.tv.
Well, it's interesting because with those early capture cards, like, I guess less so for live stream, but also regular, like, kind of the idea of it making it difficult to record audio at the same time as recording like the video stream or whatnot. It kind of created its own genre, which is kind of this post commentary over gameplay genre, which was very prominent for a while. And I'm sure there's still channels out there that do it today. But it's just kind of interesting how limitation creates these different approaches to video making that end up being very enjoyable to a lot of people. I think ultimately limitation is what makes creative people push harder. It's what gets them to try to think outside the box and come up with new ways to present what they want to present. And sometimes that comes from having worse equipment. So don't feel bad for having worse equipment, get the best of what you can with your abilities and then, creatively work around it, basically, I would say.
I would say I didn't start actually putting money into YouTube until I knew that, eventually it would pay off.
Sure.
Like all the programs I used were free when I first started. My camera, I just used my phone camera, and I like strapped it to a tripod with an elastic, and I used like a free program on my phone to like zoom and color correct and focus. So it was all free stuff. It wasn't until I started actually making money from YouTube that I was like, okay, well, now maybe I should go out and buy like a Canon or something.
Yeah.
And actually get like good, video quality.
Right. Yeah. There's a series of steps, right? You just take, you can't necessarily go to step 20 before doing 1 through 19, right?
Exactly.
And, ultimately, what you say is the most important part. So as long as you can find a way to deliver what you're saying in the most effective way, then you're pretty much set.
Yeah.
We are getting closer to the ending time, so I do kind of want to close this off with the question that I ask every guest, and that's just, if you could give one piece of advice to your former self when you started out your creative journey, what would that piece of advice be? Or even just maybe advice that you would give to new people in general. I know we kind of touched on the formal aspects, but creatively, what kind of advice do you wish that you had when you started your creative journey?
It would probably be to just believe in yourself. Don't take the comments too seriously, or even what your peers say too seriously, because they don't know you. They don't know your personality. They don't know what kind of content you want to create is. Only you know that. And you need to be, you need to be good with yourself on what you want to create.
Yeah. Staying true to what it is you actually want to make, and having confidence in that too. You know? Just because ultimately we've kind of touched and danced around this topic a lot, but you ultimately know how you need to express yourself, and being able to capitalize on that specifically makes everything else kind of magically fall into place, right? You have to break it down to this core, because a lot of people will go in seeing what other people do and think, I want to do immediately that. But if you break down to the core what it is you actually want to say and why you want to say it, and then build from that, everything else is just going to feel natural. So when you're getting comments about how your personality drives your content, and they say, well, why is it driven this way? It might not be something you have to entirely value, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just because, just because you want to be the next JonTron, there's already a JonTron. There's already a Scott DeWaz. You just
you want to be the next Joe.
Scott DeWaz didn't want to be the next, Scott DeWaz. He just made videos because that's what he wanted to make. He made videos. He made them in his own style, and it worked for him. People don't if people wanted to watch a video about Mass Effect, there's a million people who make videos about Mass Effect. They come for the person, not the thing itself.
It's arguably the only unique thing about a piece of content is the person behind it, because everything's formally been done before. But even Scott DeWaz, there's now a lot of channels who feel like they want to be Scott DeWaz, and I've been seeing videos pop up. They'll have a similar enough style to where even doing like borders and bright colors, but just not blue, like red or green or something. And I'm watching, I'm like, oh, this is very much inspired from Scott the Woz. And there's definitely, you know, some things to learn through that kind of imitation, but ultimately, you should strive to be who you are at your prime, basically, as opposed to just who someone else is.
When it's very noticeable when everyone starts, they take from their inspirations. Everyone does it. I took from JonTron and AVGN, but eventually, like, you need to find your own space in YouTube or whatever you're doing. You need to find where you fit in and what would make you stand out from the rest of the crowd.
Definitely. Well, and through imitation is a great way of figuring out what your style is too. You know,
you just have to remember to not, you know, stick with imitating. I see a lot of people who will start by imitating something and they'll never change from that. They'll always be like, I want to be the next JonTron. So they imitate JonTron, or they imitate, you know, AVGN or whatever, and then they stick with it and they never find their own personality. And it's just like, well, that person already exists, so why would they watch you when they can just watch them?
Right. They end up putting themselves in a box with no room to evolve, and they decline the option to evolve and the opportunities. And if you go so far down that route, then suddenly your viewer base or your audience isn't going to want you to evolve either. So it's kind of a recipe for disaster if you don't at least allow yourself to peek into your own personality and develop through that naturally. I think it was when I had Rasputin on here, he was mentioning that he would take inspiration from very specific elements of other creators, maybe some way they script things or some way they present things in editing or certain ways they articulate themselves. And then through that process of taking mini inspirations from people, kind of developed his own persona on YouTube just by taking some of the smaller inspirations. And he only found who he wanted to be on YouTube through taking those inspirations. So there's definitely value to it, but you definitely don't want to box yourself in. Do it cut for cut and let your content evolve. You can't let your content be stagnant. You got to let it be able to flourish and evolve from what it was. And,
when I first started, it was like a lot of my inspirations came from, you know, I want to be funny like PBG or Gerard, or like the Completionist or JonTron. Like those were the big guys at the time that I wanted to be funny like. And then like my creative processes like scripting and editing all came from my background with the machinima I was making, and Digital Fear, who like made a whole thing on like how to make machinima. So he went over the scripting process and the recording process and all that, and like all of those processes I took from him. It's just a matter of like taking bits and pieces from people and like using those how to learn how to become a better creator, and then evolving from there into you know, evolving into your own you know, way of doing things.
Absolutely. Well, from everything I watch, I can very much see that you are a unique creator and that you are not absolutely boxing yourself in another persona. So it seems like you've managed to do it by now, which is great. And hopefully some of you guys out there watching can take from this advice and develop your own persona in what you create. And ultimately, I think we are just about out of time on this podcast. So Badman, thank you so much for joining me here today. Would you care to kind of plug where people can find you? Maybe in general, what you're working on these days, with keeping in mind that the release date might not be super soon from now. But where can people find you, Badman?
You can find me over on my YouTube. I believe it's youtube.com/Badman Reviews. You can also find me on my Twitch, which is twitch.tv/Badman Reviews. Currently, right now, I'm working on a Crash Bandicoot fan games. And for the foreseeable future, working on fan game videos, reviews, and cut content. So if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, come take a stop by, see what there is.
Awesome. And for any updates on any of that, they can also follow you on Twitter, correct?
Yes, I believe it's twitter.com/Badman Reviews. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've checked.
Well, if you search Badman, I'm sure you'll find it eventually. There's only a handful of bad people out there, so you'll eventually.
If you look up Badman Reviews, you'll find it.
There you go. Awesome. And of course, thank you all out there watching for supporting. If you're here on Patreon, I appreciate your support. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, or whatnot, then keep in mind we also have a video podcast over on the YouTube channel eventually, as well as highlights if you'd like to check out any of these topics in a more condensed form. And with that, I will see you guys in the next episode. So long.